Hello everyone, this is Timothy with Computer Aided Instruction. In this video, we're going to be recreating this website that I created in advance, and we're going to be focusing primarily on creating a drop-down menu, but we're also going to talk about styling the page a little bit to a certain extent. So, one thing I want to point out is that we have a header region here, and I have a background image. And one thing I want to point out about this image is that it's not starting at the very top of the picture. I didn't crop the picture at all. I'm using CSS code to push the picture halfway down the graphic itself, so basically your browser is cropping the picture in a sense, but not really. It's just saying, hey, let's start looking at the picture halfway down. So that way I was able to get a piece of the boat, some of the birds, and some of the sea in the picture, and not just the sky at the very top. So that's something you can do in CSS, and you can avoid having to open up Photoshop or some other art program to crop your pictures. Another thing I want to talk about is the drop-down menu itself, so let me just show you what it looks like. This is really basic, really simple. I'm going to go ahead and just show you the magician's trick for pulling off this effect. Basically, these containers are always on the screen. It's just a matter of them appearing and being visible when I hover my mouse over the parent links or hover my mouse over the container itself. So when I'm not hovering, it's invisible. When I am hovering, it's visible. That's basically all there is to this drop-down menu. And I also want to point out that I have a footer region at the bottom of the page. It's going to appear automatically at the very bottom of the page, and I'll show you how to do this with CSS. We're just using these standard structure tags for HTML5 to designate these different sections. So this is header, this is nav, this is main, and this is footer. We talked about this in an earlier video in a series, so you might want to go back and rewatch that video. Now, this is what we're going to be working off of and turning this into this. And it's going to take a lot of work. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's look at the CSS and the HTML. So here's the skeleton of our website. At the very top of the page, I have, doc type HTML, which is pretty standard HTML. In my head tag, all I'm doing is linking to the external style sheet, which is called style.css. It's sitting in the same folder as this drop menu.html file. The title of the page is Atlanta Boat LLC, which, as you can see in the tab here. That's what the title does. It just adds a name for your website to the tab in your browser. And then we have body, and then for the header, I don't have to put an image here. I don't have to do this. I'm going to just use a background image in the header. So that way I don't have to worry about cropping the picture. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then here's the navigation bar. It's just really simple. I have the structure tag nav, and inside of that I have a paragraph, and then just a series of links. Now let's look at the picture. Let's look at the website again. If you notice, there's a big gap of space between the two different links. To create this effect, I'm using this code right here. This is the and sign NBSP semicolon. This shortcut is just a way to add space in your HTML code. I didn't want to put BRs here because that's going to make sure that the menu is stacked vertically rather than horizontally. Now, there's another way that you can add space between your links, and I'll do that when we start making our drop-down menu. This is just going to be a basic standard menu for now, but I don't want to do too much coding right now. And this region here on the page is called main. So I'm using the main structure tag. All I have is a heading. I have a link to another page, and I have a line break, and then I have the footer. And I'll use CSS code to push the footer down the page and add some padding and things like that. So now let's go to my CSS page. I pretty much left it blank for the most part, other than adding some background colors for the body. Let me add a background color for the navigation bar. So let me go to my color chart. What color was I using initially? It's just kind of, it's not quite navy blue, it's just a dark blue, so I think this looks pretty good. We'll use this color code going forward. I'm going to close that out. And I need to have a hashtag in front of the color code. Let's save it, refresh. And it looks pretty good. But you'll notice that the links are gone because the links aren't actually gone. It's just that the links are blue and this background is blue. So there's no contrast. So if I want to change the color of my links, I'm going to add some CSS code. A:*link, that's going to be the basic link. I'm going to change the color to white. Unfortunately, if I do that, it's not going to just affect the links in the nav bar. It's also going to affect this link in this bottom region here. So let's think about what we did in the last video. We said that this is only going to apply when we have things appearing in the nav container. Another thing besides just the link is the color of a link after it's been visited. I want to make that color white as well. As you can see, here's a link that I clicked already and it looks kind of red. I'm not really a big fan of doing that, so I'm going to just make a visited color white as well. And then I'll make a hover link. So when I have a mouse directly over the link, I'll make that maybe an orange. Let me reopen my the tab I just closed and find an orange color that I want to use. Something like this will be fine. You can choose whatever color you want. Let me add a semicolon at the end. And let me delete this curly bracket that keeps appearing. I'll also refresh the page. I did something wrong. I didn't have the closing curly brackets everywhere. So let me save. Whoops. Let me refresh my page. And everything is copacetic. So when I hover my mouse over my links, they appear orange. The links are white here, but the links anywhere else outside of the nav container, they're still blue. Actually, one thing I want to do is make all of my links that hover orange, because I think it looks cool. So not just the ones in the navigation bar, but all links in general. So let me have nav a:*hover, comma, and a hover. Refresh, and that did the trick. If you're uncertain about why I had to have nav a:*hover and a hover with a comma between, watch the last video, because we talked about that in a lot more detail than I am going to go into right here. You know what? I'll move these closing curly brackets up just so I can save some space. So we have the header. We have the body tag, which is just going to have a red color. Here's one thing that is interesting. You're probably noticing that there's an edge around my main, around my nav, and around my footer. If you want everything to be pushed directly up against the edge of the screen, like the footer and the navigation, one thing I should do is add margin 0 pixels to my body tag. And that'll get rid of that gap that you were seeing if you want everything to push directly up against the edge of the screen. If I don't do that, your browser is going to automatically give your body a margin of, this is probably about 5 pixels if I had to guess. It's not 10, I think it's maybe 5 pixels, something like that. Okay, so let's move on. I gave my navigation bar some color. I need to give it some space. So let's give it a little bit of padding. I'm adding 10 pixels for the top, left, bottom, and right, because I might end up changing it. If I like the way it looks, then yeah, actually, you know what? I like the way it looks, so let's just keep it at 10 pixels altogether. Cut out some of the code that we don't need. What else would I want to do with the navigation? Let's give it, I guess I should indicate a height of 30 pixels. Something like that. Maybe I can get rid of the padding since I'm setting the height. If I had height spelled correctly, it would work. That's not a lot of space. Let's make the height 50. Actually, you know what? I'll make the height just 40, but I'm going to add a padding top. I should add a padding to the top and left of 10. Saving it, refreshing it. I guess I do want a padding to the bottom as well of 10. Maybe I need a padding at the bottom of 20 would look better. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I want to move this footer to the bottom. Let's just go ahead and do that. So what we could do is add the code. First of all, let me give it a minimum height of maybe like 100 pixels, so it's not so thin. Let me add a width of 100%. I have a background color of a color. I don't want the text into my footer to be pushed up against the edge. So let me add a padding of 10 pixels. And then for the position, I'm going to use just relative. And I'm going to add bottom of 0. Because I want this footer to appear at the very bottom of the page all the time. So let me save. Let's see what happens. Well, it's not appearing at the bottom for one thing. I guess I can make the position absolute. Okay, one thing that I want you guys to notice is that we now have the scroll bar. I have the width set to 100%. So I'm not sure why we have to have this scroll bar here. Actually, I do know why, but it's because of the padding. For some reason, padding in some browsers, I'm using Firefox, so padding in some browsers will actually make your whatever container that it's inside of bigger than it needed to be. So this isn't just 100%, it's 100% and 10 pixels. So is there a way I can ensure that the width is going to be 100% without having to worry about the 10 pixels of padding that are added to the right, plus the 10 pixels of padding that are added to the left? because you don't want to. When you think of a horizontal scroll bar, the padding's adding 10 pixels to the left and to the right. So that's going to be a padding of 20 pixels altogether. So what you can do is say, yes, I want my width to be 100%, but I also want to adjust for the padding. So let me subtract 20 pixels. Let me put a space in between these. This is not going to work because I'm missing something, but let me just show you. It didn't work. In fact, it made it worse. So what you want to do is type in CALC for calculation, put this calculation in parentheses, and then your browser will do the work. It'll say, hey, make the width 100%, but subtract 20 pixels. I might need to subtract more than 20 pixels. This should be working. Am I missing something? Oh yeah, there's also the gap of space because of the body. Because of the body is not pushed up against the edge of the container. So what I can do is say left is absolute 0. So this is going to be at the very edge of the container. Not the container, but of the screen. So yeah. I'm still not sure about using position absolute. I think I should be using relative. Let me double check. See what's going to happen. Nope. We better make it absolute. Okay, so let me explain the code and why this is working. Okay, so this is going to have a minimum height of 100. So if I start adding more and more paragraphs of information at the bottom, so I might have a link to a careers page, I might have a link to a blog, I might have a link to all of our social media platforms, whatever. I might have some other text with disclaimers about our privacy policy, about how we use cookies on the website, things like that. So this footer region could very well be need a height of 500 pixels. So that's why I'm going to use just a minimum height. So at a minimum, if I barely have anything in the footer, it's going to still be 100 pixels high. So that's why min-height is good. Width, I explained the calculation. I needed to adjust for the 10 pixels of padding to the left and right, so that's why I have the calculation of 100% width minus 20 pixels. If I had a padding of like 50, then I would need to subtract 100 pixels. 50 on the left, 50 on the right. Now, the position property is a really complicated topic that needs its own video, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. For this property, I can think of 4 values that you can use. You can use fixed, you can use static, you can use absolute, and you can use relative. A fixed position, I guess, is good if you want to have like a container floating around on your screen that's always going to be there no matter how you scroll. Kind of like if you have some sort of a light box that's going to appear on the screen and you want it to stay on the screen no matter how the consumer is like scrolling around on your web page, and maybe the light box is just like some sort of reminder saying, hey, remember to subscribe. So fill in your email address into this field or something like that. And then you would have an X at the top corner so that people can close the light box. I guess that's one way you could use a fixed position element. I personally just don't recommend it because it's just going to be something that's going to be annoying if someone wants to scroll away from whatever's floating around on the page and following them. So that leaves us with the absolute and the relative position. Now, okay, before I explain what absolute and relative means, let me just say this. When you use absolute and relative position, this also allows you to use bottom, left, top, and right as properties. And you can add values to them. It's kind of like adding a margin to a floating container, to be perfectly honest. So if I use position relative and then I use top 10, this is going to take whatever container has that position and it's going to push it down 10 pixels. Or if I use bottom 10, it would push it up 10 pixels. If I use left 10, it would push it to the right 10 pixels. So it's kind of acting like a margin. So that's why you want to use position, so you can move things around from where it's normally situated in the flow of your HTML code. So in the instance of this footer, I have a position of absolute, and I have a bottom 0 and a left 0. So that means this is going to be pushed up against the bottom left-hand corner of my screen. So the absolute position is relative to the page as a whole. Now, if I use position relative, and then I change the position with bottom left, top, or right, I'm changing the position of this container in relation to itself. So it would be like adding a margin of 10 to the top if I use top 10. And you're probably wondering, well, what's the point? Why don't I just use a float tag and a margin? Well, some people don't like using floats, so position's another way of getting around that and moving things around on your screen. So absolute position here, bottom 0, left 0 is a good idea. And one other thing I could do is, instead of having this width of 100% minus 20 pixels, what I could have done was have left 0 and also have right 0. And this would cause my footer to stretch from the bottom left corner of the screen to the right corner of the screen. But I'll just leave it at width here just because. But just know that you have another opportunity to stretch your footer out by using left 0, right 0. And it would have been a lot easier than doing this calculation. But I'm going to leave the calculation here just for the sake of seeing, just for the sake of a reminder of that we have this opportunity to use this variable, I guess you could say. One other thing to consider is if you have a container within a container, and both of the containers have the position values, or the position properties, I should say, those will play off of each other and affect each other, especially if they both have like absolute positions, or one's an absolute and one's a relative. An absolute will play off if it's ancestor, so its parent container. Well, anyways, what else can we talk about? Let me add some padding to the main. So that's driving me nuts, seeing the text pushed right up against the left side of the screen. Padding left, 10 pixels. Let me just make padding of 10 pixels in general. So it'll also push down items from the top. For whatever reason, adding the padding to the main didn't cause the scroll bar to appear, which is kind of weird. But it did make the container a little bit taller. It didn't just push it down, it also increased the height of the container. So that's one thing I don't really like about padding, is that it won't just push items around inside of the container, it'll also expand the size of the container. But for whatever reason, it didn't expand the left and right side of the container, but it did to the footer. So you just have to keep a close eye on what you're doing when you're coding. Okay, let's go back to the navigation bar. Let's go ahead and start adding our drop downs. Okay, so let's go ahead and start making a drop down menu. What I want to do is I want to make a copy of this, because I don't want to just dismantle this. I just want to keep it there for a frame of reference. But you know what? Let me take this comment here, and let me just edit this out. So it's not going to be visible on the page because I commented it out. I talked about how to comment out sections of your HTML code in the last video, but if basically you want to keep something on the page just because you think it would be useful to have this later, and I don't want to delete it and then have to type it out again later, just put a comment around it, and your browser will not read it, because it's going to think, well, these are just notes that the author of this website made, and it doesn't need to be displayed on the page. So that's what the commenting out something means. So this is going to be our navigation bar. I wanted to go ahead and start dismantling this. So instead of having a paragraph here, I want to use a div container. I'm going to get rid of these spaces. I'm going to put all of these main links inside of a div container. Now, which ones do I want to have drop down menu items? I'll need to create more containers for each of them. So let's have something below about. We'll have a couple links here. We'll have a couple links below sailing. And we'll keep home and contact as they are, because nothing needs to go beneath them. We're not going to have drop down panels. If we go back to our original example, it was only about and sailing, where we had boat rentals, our services, and we had yachts and ocean liners as the drop down items. So let's just recreate that. So let me add href equals, I guess we could just do rentals.html. I didn't create pages for all of these. These are just filler links. And we'll have boat rentals. And then we'll have our closing A tag. Let's save the page and just see what it looks like so far. Kind of a mess. But there's some more coding that needs to be done to make sure that these all line up horizontally and not vertically by having a series of containers next to each other like this. One thing I do want to go ahead and say right now is that the about, the boat rentals, and the R services, I want these to be like nested containers. So this closing div tag needs to be after the our services closing tag. So this is a more so this is now the parent container, and these are two child containers. Save it, refresh. It's not obvious, but it is going to be more obvious when we add more code. So this is now, about is now going to be the parent, boat rentals and our services are going to be the children of about. And we're going to do the same thing here. So let me move this closing div tag into beneath these two. And beneath sailing, we had something about yachts. So let me save that. All of my links are appearing. So what I need to do now is add code saying, hey, I want all these divs containers to line up horizontally, or at least all of the parent ones. So home, about, sailing, and contact. And then the containers for the children, I need to add some code there for that. So let me add some classes to all of these different containers. Class equals, I'm going to have to come up with a class name for the parents. I should have two S's. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave the class for the parents blank for a minute. I might be able to just position these horizontally just using the nav container name. But I'm definitely going to need a class for the children. So let me add that. For a name for the children, I could just use something like a menu dash child or something like that will be fine. You can use whatever name you want when you come up with a custom. That's not a child, this is a parent link. This is a child, this one is a child. Same here. Yachts, ocean liners, boat rentals, and our services, those are the child. Those are the children of this one. So let me go back to my CSS page. In the nav bar, let me add something that'll make all of the links line up horizontally. So let me add display :inline. We talked about this a little bit in one of my previous videos. And let's just see what happens. Well, that didn't work. So adding display inline did not work. Didn't achieve what I wanted. So let's just get rid of that. Click save. Whoops. Like I said, these links don't actually work. They're just filler. So getting rid of display inline for nav is not going to work. So we're going to have to just create a custom selector to make all of the parent links display lined up horizontally. So I'm calling the children menu child, so I'll just call the parent menu. Let me copy that here, here, and here. Cool. So what I need to do now is add three custom selectors. Menu dot menu dash child, and I will need one for dot menu hover. Actually, this isn't gonna work. I need to have dot menu :hover. When you want to, kind of like when you're using a : link, a specific type of link, a specific state of the link. A specific state of the link will be link visited or hover. I need to have menu : hover here, so when you're specifically hovering your mouse over anything with the class of menu, this is going to happen. So here I want to display as an inline block. That's pretty much all I really need. Here, the child containers I don't want to display at all. So I'm going to type in display none. But I do want them to display when you hover your mouse over, so I'll say display block. So let me save. Now let me refresh the page. This is what the links look like so far. It's not 100% working properly. Like, I don't see the sublinks for about and sailing appearing when I hover my mouse over. Everything's actually moving around. Really weird, so let's add some more code. Again, this is what it's supposed to look like, so we're not quite there yet. At least we have the links now appearing horizontally. So, one thing I do want to keep, I want to make sure that these links, the parent links, don't move around like they're doing right now, and this should not be happening. So to menu display link, I'm going to add position absolute. They should keep the links absolutely horizontal without breaking lines when you hover your mouse over anything. But I'm going to need to add some space in between each link so that they're not all just crammed one on top of each other. They're not all stacked one on top of each other. So the easiest thing to do, other than to create new unique classes for every single parent link, is just to say, since I'm using the position absolute, let me add some style here. Style equals left, maybe 75 pixels. Let's see if that pushes it over a little bit. Yes, so that put a gap of space in between home and about. So let me add another 75 pixels to the next one. the next parent link. Actually, it's not going to work. It's just going to stack on top of about. So let me add 75 plus 75, so 150 pixels. And then this one should be 75 plus 150 is 225. Let's go back to our page. And that looks pretty good. Actually, this gap looks a lot bigger than this one. Which is kind of odd. I should make this 215 instead of 225. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm satisfied with that for now. So let's move on. Now I need to add some code to the children. So let me give the children a background image, a background color, I should say. Let's make it the same as the navigation. One thing I noticed is that I need to add something about menu child. That's what the problem was. This is not displaying as a block, only menu hover. So when I'm hovering over the menu, the child should display as a block. So now let's save it. I don't want this orange color. I chose the wrong background color. So let me go to the nav. The background color here is this. Now it's going to look a lot better. Refresh the page. Let me make these containers a lot bigger. So the menu child should have a width of let's go for something like maybe 150 pixels will look good. Let's give it some padding of maybe 20 pixels, something like that. Let's see where we are. Let me push it down a little bit so it's not so close to the parent. So let me add a margin top, maybe 20 pixels. Let's see what that looks like. Now let's also, instead of not just giving it a width, let's also give this container a height of about 30 pixels as well. So each of the children containers have a height of 30 pixels. I actually don't want to have this gap here between the containers. I want it to look like it's one solid container. So let me get rid of the margin top. So that the children look like they're connected as one container. But let me give the parent a margin bottom of 10 pixels to push the child container down a little bit. Let me make it 100 pixels to exaggerate it. It's not working, which is interesting. So is there a way to add a little bit of space? Not really. I mean, I could have used a position property, but I don't want to really get into that. I'm actually, let me look at my example. I didn't create a gap of space between the container, between the child container and the parent, so I think we're fine. It looks okay to me. We'll just leave it where it is. But this website is really bare. One thing that I forgot to cover so far is what are we going to do with this header? We have the tags here, but there's no coding here. So let me add an image real quick. Let me add, let's have this container height of, well, just a standard height of 400 pixels. We're gonna add a background image, colon, you want to type in URL. Sorry, I don't want curly brackets, I just want parentheses and a semicolon at the end. And inside of the parentheses, I want to have single quotation marks. And then I want to have my image name right here and the location in my folder. So I have an image that I picked up from Pixabay right here. So I'm just going to copy the name. It's sitting in the same directory as my website. I could add a subfolder called media or called pictures or something like that, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to put the image name here and the extension. Save it. Refresh the page, and now we have my picture. So if you recall in the test version that I did earlier, the pirate was not a pirate ship, but the yacht, the sailboat, it's not starting at the same position. So what I want to do is pull this picture up a little bit. So I want to start my picture like right here and not right here. So let me push the picture up the page a little bit. We can do that with CSS code. So let me add background dash position colon, and this is where it's interesting. You have a y-axis and an x-axis. For the x-axis, I'm going to type in 0, and for the y-axis, I'm going to type in, let's use 55%. That's what I used earlier, and that worked. If I wanted to use something for the x-axis, I could put in maybe 25%, and let's just see what it looks like. It just pulled the picture over to the left a little bit. 25% is not much, so let me use 55 here as well. And now the boat's more almost in the center of the page. But I'll just leave it where it naturally is. With the left of 0. So use background dash position colon, and then you can affect the x-axis and the y-axis. So I'm just pushing the image up 55%. If I pushed it up 100%, I wonder what it would look like. I've never tried that before. You're just going to see the bottom of the picture at the very bottom of the container. I don't think this looks that good, so we can see more of the water, we see more of the boat, the body of the boat, things like that. So I think this picture looks good right here. Now, one interesting thing is that the footer is no longer at the very bottom of the page. So I need to get rid of absolute. That's why I was saying I think we should use relative for the footer instead of absolute. So now the footer's at the bottom, but there's this gap of red space at the bottom, which I don't like. So let me go to the body. Let me add a margin bottom of 0. And that ensures that the page goes absolutely to the bottom. Again, if I don't want to have this gap of color at the top of the page or on the sides, then I would need to have a margin of 0 all around, but I'm fine with that. So this covers everything I wanted to talk about in this video. We have a simple drop-down menu, which is just basically making containers appear when you mouse over specific tags on your page. We have our footer sitting at the bottom of the screen, and we have a background image at the top in our header. I need to get rid of this gap here, and then we can conclude this video. Let's see. I'm just gonna add a margin top of -40. That moved it up a little bit more. Let's make it maybe 70. There might be an easier way to do this. What did I do to create this big gap of space? I think it's because I have a break tag or something in between. Yeah, let me get rid of this. I don't want a space between main and nav. That way I don't have to code this margin top. Whoops, sorry. That looks good to me. But if you did want a gap of space between the navigation and the main section, you would just either go to CSS, either go to the HTML page and just add a line break, or you would just go to the CSS and add a margin to the bottom. Something like that. But I don't want the gap, so let me delete that, save it, refresh, and the page looks pretty good to me. But if I want to get rid of the white space, the red space anyways in this case, if I want to get rid of the red background color from appearing on the page, margin 0 for the body, and here's our web page. So thank you for watching this video. In the next video we might talk about making a responsive website, but I might just talk about some more CSS tricks like I've been doing in this video and the last video. So stay tuned.